In this video, I'm going to share with you 10 ways of easily cutting back on sugar in our home to improve the health of ourselves, our kids, and our families as a whole. I'm Dr. Michael Smith. I'm a naturopathic doctor, and I love helping improve the health of families. It's really something that I'm passionate about, and diet and food is a big component of everything that we do. It's a main part of our health. Food is our medicine, or it can be. It also can be our poison if we let it. I feel like sugar tends to be more of that than it is to be more of our medicine, even though Mary Poppins might disagree with that. There are many applications to this. If we're talking just about general health, if we're talking about the health of our kids, about their behavior, we could talk about diabetics. This could apply to kids and adults alike. In this video, I'm really going to focus on kids, although all the information that you hear can easily be extrapolated for the big people, meaning those that are older, adults. This is also not medical advice. As always, with all my videos, I encourage you to take what you learn and learn from it, and talk with your healthcare provider, a naturopathic doctor, another healthcare practitioner about how to apply it in your family, in your life. And there's some very specific cases when this information may not fully apply, as in cases of really low blood sugar. That's a whole different topic, and we're not really going to go there. So it's one thing to say we need to give our kids less sugar, or eat less sugar, or as a diabetic, cut back on sugary foods. How do we do that? What is the mechanism? What are simple, actionable ways of doing that? Let's talk about this. But first, I want to kind of just do a recap about why we would want to cut back on sugar in the first place. Why am I even spending a whole YouTube video talking about sugar? There's lots of reasons, actually. Sugar is one of the foods that I think of as inflammatory. Inflammation can be all around our body. It can be in our gut. It can be on our skin when we cut ourselves. It can be in our brain in really bad cases, in our lungs. There's a lot of inflammation. Is not great. It's a way of our bodies responding to oftentimes an invader, a pathogen, bacteria, virus, things like that. But sugar can also lead to inflammation. It can contribute to that, especially if it's already there. Sugar can weaken our immune system. If we're not feeling well, eating sugar is not going to help us feel better. It's going to do the opposite. Diets that are high in sugar, especially for kids, increases the risk of developing conditions like diabetes. If our blood sugar is so high, our insulin receptors are always saturated, and I didn't say that right. The receptor, our insulin is working. Our body just becomes used to it. It becomes resistant to insulin. That's type 2 diabetes. It can be part of insulin resistance. That can be a problem. That also is related to obesity. It can be. Data that have shown that when we're increasing sugar, that's often associated with increased calorie consumption, because foods that are really sweet are full of calories. They also don't have a lot of nutrients. Nutrient depletion can be a really big problem. And one of the things that I often see related to kind of obesity, kind of nutrient depletion, is triglycerides. We often see triglycerides listed on our lipid panel. We've got cholesterol, HDL, LDL, and triglycerides. That's one of them. Triglycerides are often formed when our body eats sugar, whether it's bread, carbohydrates, rice, potatoes, whatever sugar it turns into. It's ultimately broken down into really basic building blocks of glucose. When our body has enough glucose to meet the energy needs, it funnels it off into a storage unit. What's that storage unit? It's fat, basically. The fat that we have on our bodies is not often, in many cases, not even caused by fatty food that we're eating. It's caused by sugar that our body then is effectively storing in the form of fat. It converts it to that, especially to triglycerides. We can think back to the hunter-gatherer days when sugar and plants and berries and food was scarce. So the way our bodies are kind of reflects the idea that when we eat sugar, when there's a lot of it around, we eat it. And when there's not a lot of it, our body has stored up that extra fat so that when the food supply is limited, we can tap into the fat that our body has stored. That's the general idea, but really it can backfire, and that's the problem that we face. I'm not a dentist, but I don't need to really explain that sugar is not necessarily great for teeth. And there's different ideas behind that. The prevailing one is that sugar feeds bacteria that's in our mouth. Bacteria create acid. Acid breaks down the enamel in our teeth. And there's different ideas beyond that as well. In a lot of ways, sugar is not great. I didn't even mention ADHD. How when kids eat sugar, they have a hard time focusing. They're a little more hyperactive. Is there research on that? Yes. Is there research against it? Yes. Is it a kind of a controversial subject? Most definitely. But I'm a dad. I have 2 kids. I see what happens to my kids when they eat sugar. They get a little more crazy. In not a bad way, but they just have a lot more energy that they need to burn off. And it's really hard, especially at bedtime when we want to put them to bed. So I'm speaking from my anecdotal experience as a dad on that one. And I believe it's true with many other kids as well. Okay, so we talked about why would we want to cut back on sugar. Let's talk about the how. I'm going to talk about 10 ways. Number 1, we need to change our mentality about sugar, about the need for sugar. Oftentimes we have sugar, and when I say sugar, I mean like sugary foods, cookies, processed things, candy, ice cream, things like that. Oftentimes we have sugar because we feel like we need it. Do we really need it? I'm going to suggest that we don't necessarily need sugar. We need extra sugar. Our body does need sugar. It has needs for calories. It needs energy. Our brain is the biggest consumer of glucose in our body, one of them. We need sugar to function. But we often get adequate amounts of carbohydrates and sugar through our diet. If we're eating breads, if we're eating vegetables and fruits and nuts and other things that have sugar and the carbohydrates already in them. There's a lot of healthy ways of getting sugar. This is all of the extra stuff that we use to help us feel good. Why does sugar help us feel good? Because sugar increases the dopamine in our brain. Dopamine is that feel-good hormone. It's that reward hormone. Serotonin is also kind of the feel-good hormone. Dopamine is the reward hormone, neurotransmitter in our brain. So when we eat sugar, we get dopamine. There's a dopamine spike. We like it. And then we want more. I've noticed that, especially with my kids, that when they eat sugar, they want more sugar. If they've been given a piece of candy, say at church, they want more sugar that on Sunday night for dessert or dinner, or afternoon, whatever it may be. Because they had it earlier. They had that dopamine spike. They're like, ooh, I want sugar. Let's get more of it. Let's ask for more of it. What's really interesting is that sugar can be just as or more addicting than cocaine. Let me repeat that. Sugar can be just as or more addicting than cocaine. We see about drug addictions and what cocaine can do. Sugar can be addicting. It tastes good. Our kids want it, so they eat it. We want it. I like sugar. I really do. I often want it, but I also know how it makes my body feel. So I often try not to. Kids don't need to have a really sugary cupcake candy in their lunch or at birthdays or whatever. They might want it, but they don't need it. Kids don't need to have a birthday cake or ice cream. It's traditional, certainly. But do you really need it? There might be other options. So, number one, that was changing the perspective about our need for sugar. Number two, related to that, change how we define dessert. Dessert after dinner is one of the most common places that we consume sugar, processed sugar. My wife lived in France for a few years, and as she was interacting with with native French people there, they would offer her sometime. She would go to dinner at their home, and they would offer her dessert. Would you like an apple or a yogurt? Would you like a piece of fruit or a yogurt or whatever it might be? And really, that perspective has changed the way we approach sugar in our home. We have dessert almost every day with our kids. We say, if you want dessert, you need to have it right now at 7:30. Otherwise, it's too late and you need to get ready for bed. And what is that dessert? It's often fruit. Our kids love like blueberries and milk, or frozen fruit and milk, or just frozen fruit. Other types of just fresh fruit. If we've made muffins or something, or piece of toast with jam or honey on it. But there's no like ice cream or cookies or other things like that. We don't need to have that for dessert. We can change the way we define dessert. The third way that we can easily control the sugar in our home is by owning our role as the meal planner and the grocery shopper. As parents, we do that. Our kids, they might come with us to go grocery shopping, but they're not grocery shopping. We are, as parents. We're the ones that are spending our money to buy food for our family. We have control over what we eat and what we buy. We can own that. We don't need to give in to what our kids say of what they need for sugar, for food. So, what are some strategies for healthier grocery shopping? When possible, don't take your kids. Now, when I'm at work, when I've been at school, my wife is home and she's the one that's doing the grocery shopping. She also has 2 kids in tow all the time. So what does she do? Often takes the kids grocery shopping. I'm 100% aware that it's not always possible to leave your kids at home when you go grocery shopping. I get it. But the consequence of that, as you may know, is when your kids are in your grocery cart, they're looking at the shelves, the things that are eye level, and they're like, ooh, colors, fun things, sugary stuff. And they want it. They grab it. They put it in the cart. And then it ends up on the checkout. And it ends up in your car and back in your fridge. Of not taking our kids can be really helpful. Related to that, you may have heard the adage or the advice to don't go grocery shopping hungry. when we are hungry, our bodies are craving high energy foods because we want to satisfy that hunger as quickly as possible. So, what do? We can eat beforehand. Go after dinner. Go after lunch, after breakfast, whatever it might be. And there's a way of even avoiding the grocery store altogether, and that's through grocery delivery. Our family's been doing grocery delivery for several years now, and it's an amazing invention that allows us to look on our phones or computer, or however you do it, order what we want, push send order, and it's delivered. It is, for my wife and I, it is so worth the membership that we pay for getting that grocery delivery. Completely worth it. Because when we're ordering on our phones, we're not perusing the aisles and catching glimpses of other things that look good and maybe taste good. We're only focused on what's on our list. It also helps us save money, which is a nice side benefit of that. The fourth thing that we can do is to really start with us as adults, as parents. Our kids look up to us scarily more than we want to admit to, and they will learn from us how to approach food by watching how we approach food. If all we eat is sugar, then all that they're going to want to eat is sugar. If we eat our vegetables, then they're more likely to want to eat their vegetables. It really can start with us. What do we gravitate toward? What do we want? We can control ourselves. Don't need to give in to every whim of what our kids want, like I said earlier. And we also don't need to give in to every whim of what we want. We can control ourselves. The power is within us. And the same is true with food. Side note, I know that in many cases there are eating disorders. I want to acknowledge that. And I'm talking about food and the relationship we have with food. That's a real thing. And there are resources available. I will put them in the comment section of this, in the description of this video. I'm not focusing on that right now. I want to acknowledge it though, because it can be hard sometimes with our relationship with food. For those who don't have eating disorders, there is a lot that we can do. So that's my side tangent there. Okay, so those four things, the first four, really related to our mentality of how we approach sugar and how we approach our diet, how we approach our meal planning, things like that. Now we're going to dive into the last six, or more actionable, things like that. So number 5 is to prioritize more of the natural forms of sugar. And when I'm thinking about that, there's a lot of forms of sugar out there. Fruit is, for me, one of them, one of the biggest ones. And we can get a lot of sweetness simply from sugar. We also need to make sure that we keep that in context, because for example, there are often, I don't have any right now or else I'd hold it up, there's fruit snacks. Little packages of gelatin, prepared fruit juice and other chemicals and sweeteners and things like that. Fruit snacks versus a piece of fruit. A fruit snack versus a fruit that is a snack. Which is healthier? An apple or a little gummy fruit snack that looks like an apple? When we're eating carbohydrates, our body needs carbohydrates, focusing on whole grains, healthy fibers, avoiding starches when possible, getting a good wide range of sources of carbohydrates that are more healthy than not. So there's a lot of more, just even through our foods, we don't need to resort to processed sugar. Number 6, don't get fooled by artificial sweeteners. Just because it says no sugar doesn't mean that there's not something in there that's making it taste sweet. In fact, almost always that I can think of, there is something in there that's making it sweet. The diet versions of foods or drinks. Aspartame and sucralose are two of those chemicals that taste sweet but aren't the best. Sucralose is, I believe, Splenda. And aspartame is just not great at all. I don't like it. It doesn't taste good for me. And if you have or know someone who has phenylketonuria, which is the body's inability to break down that amino acid, then it can be a problem. But I'm not going to focus on that right now because we're talking about sugar. One sneaky, I would almost call it artificial, because I really feel like it is. Artificial sugar forms is high fructose corn syrup. Let's talk about that. Corn syrup is sweet, comes from corns. High fructose is concentrating the fructose content of that. There's lots of different basic molecules of sugar. Glucose is one of the more common ones that our body can process. We also have lactose, galactose. Fructose is very similar. It's a 5-membered carbon ring, if you remember from your chemistry class, versus the glucose, which is a 6-membered ring. Either way, fructose is easily absorbed into our body. And when we eat a lot of fructose, and this relates to fruit, it relates to fruit juice, orange juice, apple juice, things like that, it actually bypasses all of those regulatory channels and mechanisms that our body has to regulate blood sugar, glucose. So think about it this way. If you're on a freeway and you've got which is your blood vessels, your arteries and veins, you've got all of the sugar, which are cars driving through it, and they need to make an exit to the nearest cell. They just want to get off the road. There's certain points that are roads or driveways or exits or on-ramps or off-ramps. Kind of, you get the idea. Places that they can drive. That's glucose. Fructose is even trickier. You could think of it more like, might not be a best analogy, but I'll try anyway. You could think of it more like ATVs or motorcycles, dirt bikes, things like that have a little easier time going off-road. And so they're not like following the normal exits ramps off the freeway into the cells. They're just jumping over the ditch. They just go wherever they want, and they're not stopped by the police officer, traffic cop, whatever you want to say, that's regulating how many cars are going through, how much glucose is going through. Your GLUT transporters, in case you're really curious. So fructose can bypass that. What does that do? It makes it so that our body gets that sweetness without being regulated as much. That's what the high fructose does. It makes things really sweet all of a sudden, and it's not the best for us. So, avoiding artificial sweeteners, and I include high fructose corn syrup in that. There are, thankfully, more and more products that are being made without high fructose corn syrup. So you can be aware, watch for that in the grocery store. Number 7 is what we can put into our cooking and baking. Instead of the artificial, what is the natural, what is the healthy that we can use? There are many different types of natural sweeteners. Stevia is one of them. It comes from a plant that tastes sweet. Some people have a hard time with stevia. That's fine. There's other options. Monk fruit is also from a plant. It's a really good sweetener. You only need a little bit. Xylitol is a sugar alcohol, and I say sugar alcohol in the fact that there's an OH group on that sugar molecule. That's what makes it an alcohol. You can go back to your organic chemistry class and the first few weeks, months of that to learn about the basic functional groups in organic chemistry. Alcohol is one of them. So it's not like you're drinking a beer or wine. It just simply refers to this molecule that has an alcohol group on it. Interestingly, xylitol is really good for, or has been found to be good for preventing tooth decay, and also helps with bacteria, healthy bacteria. Can kind of act like a prebiotic in a way, the food for the tons of bacteria that's in our gut. That's what it can do. When we're baking, we can avoid cane sugars, which are, I think, the most inflammatory and not the best. The white sugar, the brown sugar. We can replace it with honey, with maple syrup. I get it that those are both expensive sweeteners. It's just the truth. Sugar is so much cheaper. But when possible, we can swap it out with other things like honey or maple syrup that are natural and that don't require that. Dates are also amazingly sweet, and they're found you can use dates in many recipes as well for baking. And that's really helpful also. Okay, number 8 is the timing of when we eat sugar. I kind of mentioned this earlier. If we found that if our kids eat sugar too late, they have a hard time going to bed. So what we have in our family is a rule: you can't eat sugar after 4 p.m. You can eat sugar, whatever treats you got from whatever party, candy from Halloween or whatever, before 4 p.m., but not after. Like I said, for our dessert, it's fruit. That's more natural sweetness, just to cleanse the palate and allow our kids to not have a huge sugar spike before they go to bed. Related to number 8 is number 9, the order that we eat our food in. If you go on Instagram or social, generally, you can look up the glucose goddess. Jessie, and I can't pronounce her last name, she has amazing content out there and she shows what happens to your blood sugar after you eat certain foods. And she measures this through continuous glucose monitoring, which is something that you can kind of wear. It kind of just, it measures your blood sugar, and you can track it on your app, on your phone, and things like that through an app. And something that she's done really well is illustrate that the order of the food that you eat can affect your blood sugar more than the food itself. Let me say that again. The order that you eat your food in can affect your blood sugar more than the food that you're eating itself. So let's think about a really fancy restaurant, like a 3-course meal, 5-course meal, whatever it might be. What do you start with? You start with a salad. Those vegetables act as mucilage. You chew it up, it goes into your stomach. It's the vegetables that in some ways kind of line your intestines and line your stomach. And I like that in imagery, whether that's actually what's happening or not. I really like that idea that it's providing some mucilage as a foundation for all the food that's going to come next. What do you eat next is your main course. What's your main course? Usually a source of protein, whether it's meat, chicken, beef, fish, whatever, beans, whatever it might be. That protein is ideally next. Why? And then after that, you also have your usually a starch, rice, potatoes, things like that with that, with your main course. But then what's last is dessert. Why do you have dessert last after you have the meat? Because the meat helps stabilize your blood sugar. There's something in your stomach and that's able to more easily absorb and can regulate the blood sugar, so that when you eat your dessert last after you've eaten protein, there's less of a blood sugar spike. It's really cool. I invite you to go check out her content on social and learn about it more. Number 10, I think, is perhaps the most important and also the hardest to do, is that we need to help our kids have a good relationship with food, especially with sugar. I've talked to different people about this over the years. My wife and I have talked about it. We don't want our kids to have a negative relationship with food. And we want them to be healthy. We want them to be happy. We want them to thrive. But we also want them to not eat things that are going to make them feel bad. And we know that they will, but they might not. What can we do? We can teach our kids and help point out to them how their body feels when they eat food, when they eat sugar. So after they eat a big meal and they're maybe a little more hyperactive, if they're old enough to understand and tune into their bodies, which might be until they're 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-ish, we can help them recognize, like, hey, how are you feeling right now? Have you noticed how that sugar is making you feel? I think one of the most challenging of holidays that is hard to do this with is Halloween. And Halloween is coming up. So let's talk about Halloween. Halloween is an opportunity for kids to dress up and have fun, have parties at school with friends, maybe a church group, with family, go trick-or-treating, whether it's a trunk or treat in the neighborhood, get candy, and it's fun for most people except the people that are dealing with the after effects of the sugar. So how do we deal with that and still help our kids have a healthy relationship with food? Question mark. One, I've followed lots of people and learned, tried to understand how other people approach it. Because I'm wondering that the same thing for me and my kids. How can we help our kids feel healthy and stay healthy during Halloween? Which conveniently is also during the cold and flu season, when our bodies are more susceptible to get sick, and by eating lots of sugar, it doesn't help them to feel well. Interestingly. The consensus that I've found that I resonate with is the idea to provide our kids a healthy dinner, making sure it's really nutrient rich, have them go trick-or-treating, have fun, collect candy, come back, sort through their candy, play with it, whatever, eat some, and then leave it and help them go to bed. And then after, the switch witch, or whatever you want to call it, I've heard it called different things, that's the one I remember right now, comes and switches out the candy for either a toy, a game, video game, money, whatever it might be that our kids want, and the candy goes out into the ether of wherever else. Hopefully not parents. And I really like that idea because it helps kids have get something for, have fun. They get something, they get their candy, they get to play with it and have fun and eat some, but they get something for it, and they don't need to keep prolonging the sugar intake for days and maybe weeks or months in some cases. Like that. It's kind of like Christmas in December, you get a toy or money or something that the kids really want, but a little bit early. And related to that, maybe it's 11. I said 10. This might be an 11. This might be part of 10. Sometimes we're just going to need to let go and roll with it. We do all that we can. We do everything that we just talked about. But there's going to be times when our kids will get candy from school, from a birthday party, maybe from somebody at church, from the neighborhood, and they're going to eat it. We can't really do a lot. Maybe there is something we can do, but ultimately, sometimes we just need to roll with it. Let them eat candy and let them have a good relationship with food. When possible, point out how it makes them feel. And when it's not possible, take a deep breath and do our best, knowing that we're taking care of our bodies. We're watching how we eat because we can control that. We can control generally what comes into our home from the grocery store. And we can optimize as much as we can the conditions for success for our kids. And I think that's really what's most important. It's a relationship with ourselves. It's a relationship with our kids. And it's a relationship that we have and our kids have with food and specifically with sugar. It's all about relationships. And the healthier those relationships are, the healthier our families are going to be, the healthier our societies are going to be. I truly believe that. And for those people that like sugar a lot, you might share this video with them. Give them some ideas about how they can cut back on sugar in a nice way. I hope this has been educational for you, that you've learned something, and that what you've learned helps you want to change for the better. It takes time. It takes effort. It takes patience. It takes trying and failing and trying again. But we can, and we have the ability to change our lives, our diet, and who we are. It's an amazing opportunity that we have, and I'm so excited to be able to help patients with that on a regular basis. I've recently started practicing in Missoula, Montana. I'm so excited about it. Working here at Natura Health and Wellness Clinic in Missoula. If you are in Missoula or Montana, or you're still in Idaho, where I was practicing before, and you need some naturopathic support for you or your family, give us a call. Let's talk. I'm licensed to practice in Montana and Idaho, and I am excited to help patients and their families be better, live better, be healthier, and feel well. I'll put the information down below so you know how to get a hold of me at my clinic, at the clinic I work at. That is a nutshell about sugar. 10 ways that we can easily adapt our lives to reduce our sugar intake, sugar burden for ourselves and our kids. I hope you found this helpful. I'll see you in the next video. And until then, as I always say, be well.